Oh, I see you caught me casually doing my homework here in my casual at-home clothes. Well, now that I have you here, we might as well talk about the naval strategies of World War I. Alright, so let's dive right into the World War I naval strategies. And interestingly, both the major naval powers, Britain and Germany, expected there to be many violent confrontations among their navies during World War I. And that did not end up taking place. There were quite a few very significant confrontations and violent confrontations and battles, but there were significantly fewer than both powers expected. And this was because of their naval strategies and how they kind of played out during the war. So let's dive right into the pre-World War I British naval strategy. They had four main goals, which transferred into their war goals when the war started taking place. First of all, they wanted to ensure the unimpeded use of seas for British ships, which explained itself because they were dominance on the naval fronts before the war. They wanted to remain dominant during the war and after the war. One second. Number two, they wanted to economically pressure adversaries by denying them the use of seas, which also is kind of self-explanatory. They wanted to be able to blockade their enemies or to otherwise pressure economically their enemies to reach their goals. Number three, they wanted to assist the British Army in passage overseas to be able to mobilize the army from one place to another quickly. And number four, they wanted to prevent the invasion of British islands by overseas forces. Also self-explanatory. Sorry about that. Alright, so we have a map right here, and this actually shows British ports before the war. And you can see how they're stationed very kind of to the south of Britain. And this was meant to counteract France, because before the war broke out, and in the decade before the war, France was Britain's major competitor. And that changed, obviously. So they, right before the war, they started relocating these forts to the east, right here, to protect against a violent Germany, which would be right here. Okay, so they actually started to, and we're going to switch to the next slide, they actually started to prepare for the war around 1901, and they had their first solidified plan by 1908 or so. And in 1908, what they wanted to do is to have a close naval blockade of Germany, which would be right around here. They wanted to blockade Germany, and they were okay with violent confrontations with Germany in the process. That changed in the years following 1908, as they realized that German technology was becoming significantly better very quickly, and any close blockade of the country would entail significant losses and potentially kind of shift power from Britain to Germany. So what they decided on was a loose blockade, to blockade these areas right here, Orkney Islands, right here. They wanted to kind of cut off this place so that merchant ships and ships carrying food, trading ships carrying soldiers could not come in and to suffocate Germany in that way. Alright, so let's move on to the pre-World War I German naval strategy. They had three goals. One second. Sorry about that, I have a bit of a cold. But what they wanted to do was A, to prevent landings on the German homeland, obvious, self-explanatory. Two, to prevent a close blockade of ports, because they wanted to continue the trade, and they kind of failed in here, but there were sort of successes in that area too. And three, to maximize the risk of confrontation with the German Navy, which is risk theory, which is actually a very interesting theory, which was developed by von Tirpitz way before the war, and what it basically said that if they optimize their navy, they make it as strong as they as they can, then they would be able to potentially prevent confrontations with enemy navies, maybe prevent neutral countries from joining the war effort, and in that way help their own development. All right. So here we have the same map of the North Sea. So Germany begins to prepare for the war around 1896, and by 1905, Germany began to believe that Britain would institute a close blockade, so station their ships right around here. So what Germany does to prepare for that is they very significantly kind of beef up the ports right here. It's actually called the Heligoland Bight. It is right here. You can see it. And in that way, they prepare to defend their ports. What ends up happening, however, is they soon begin to realize that Germany will not be able to defend against a distant blockade, and that is the type of blockade that very likely Britain will try to implement. And in that case, Germany kind of splits its focus, and what they do is they try to prepare torpedoes and mine ships that kind of leave mines in the ocean to fight off a distant blockade, while at the same time leaving some forces around this area, very significant forces around this area, so that Britain can't directly attack the ports. What they overlook in that process is that Britain does not even have to enter the North Sea in order to have a distant blockade, and Britain never tries to attack these ports because they are very heavily defended. Rather, Britain just stations their troops around here and around the English Canal right here, the English Channel right here, and in that way it institutes a distant blockade of Germany, and they end up succeeding, as we'll see later. All right, so let's move on to the British naval development. And I'm just going to move myself out of the way here, okay. So this is perhaps a very confusing map of the movements of a ship called the HMS Oviedo, which is a British Navy ship, which was key in the naval blockade. It was one of the many ships that participated in the Navy blockade. And here you can kind of see just its general how it moved, how it was able to blockade Germany. And there are two facts about this. One of them is obviously it's a very successful blockade. Not only that it stopped German imports of food, of soldiers, of pretty much anything, any trade with other countries, but it also did not cause any or many direct confrontations. And this was a big success for Britain. The second interesting fact is that this actually tightened the U.S.-UK relationship, because the U.S. had fewer countries to trade with, and it saw Britain's dominance in the sea, so that actually tightened the U.S.-UK relationship. All right, so we're going to go on right here, and this is the this is definitely the biggest battle, naval battle of the war, the Battle of Jutland, and you can see, and I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can see the powerhouse of the German Navy, which is stationed again right here, and how that directly kind of met with the British forces, and this resulted in very significant British losses. Actually, twice as many British ships were sunk and personnel were killed compared to the Germans. And it's unclear who won the battle, but what is clear is that after this, Britain was very careful to not go into direct conflict with the German Navy, because they were just better off if they kind of had a blockade but farther away, so that they didn't risk their own forces. All right, so let's move on to the German naval strategy development during the war. So, before I get to this map, it's very clear that Britain was not intent upon fighting it out in the North Sea, which is right here, and this kind of undermined the fact that Germany had all of these ships here in Heligoland, and that only came to use perhaps once during that great battle, and never again. So they had all these ships here, and they were already at a naval disadvantage in terms of technology, in terms of the pure numerical, the number of ships that they had, and now they had a bunch of ships stationed where they were not used very often. They were in a defensive position. So what ended up happening is that Germany relied on its U-boats, which were very advanced and very underestimated by the British and by the Americans. And they started a practice named unrestricted warfare, where they would shoot down ships, commercial ships, ships with passengers, ships that had no war purposes at all, often without any sort of warning, because they became so desperate after the naval blockade. Many credit the naval blockade, the British naval blockade, in causing such starvation, such devastating impact on the people of Germany, that they decided to go into unrestricted warfare. With the sinking of a few of these ships, including the Lusitania, which is a very major one, which included way over 170 American passengers on it, America eventually decides to join the war effort themselves on, obviously, the Allied side, the British side. This unrestricted warfare turns out to be a major miscalculation, perhaps, for Germany. They're not able to completely stop the blockade, and meanwhile they get neutral powers involved. So each of these little circles you could see is a ship that was sunk by the German fleet. However, the U-boats, though the warfare type was not successful, the U-boats were very successful in sinking naval ships. Here we can see another map, which shows that actually Germany tried to state kind of its own blockade of the United States, American ships entering, just kind of stop trade with Britain. So here you can see a line, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but it says over here, proposed safety line for American ships, where Germany, using its U-boats, using its navy, would stop American ships from reaching England. What this only did is invigorated the U.S. war effort, and absolutely did not successfully stop trade between England and the United States. So in the end, Germany was devastated, very devastated by what took place with the naval blockade. It turned out to be a successful blockade. They did not believe that there would be, at first in 1905, when they first started preparing, they did not prepare for a distant blockade. When they started preparing, it was too late. They did not shift focus completely to it. They left ships once again over here in Heligoland. And that was their Achilles heel. They were not able to completely mobilize, and already at a disadvantage. They just could not compare to the British ships. They could not stop the blockade, and that's definitely a very significant part of what brought down Germany in World War I.